I'm very, very excited and pleased to be able to bring together two people, each in their own way, who are doing amazing, courageous things, bringing information into public view. Daniel Ellsberg, who is best known for leaking the Pentagon Papers. And Skyping in from Australia, Julian Assange, the co-founder of WikiLeaks.org. Okay, so this is the first time you're meeting each other, and I guess I have a question, which is simply, is there anything you want to say to each other?
Well, I have to say, I'm in a funny position here. I've been in psychoanalysis a couple times, a long time ago, which was good for the country, it turned out, because it I got more for my money than almost any other analysis. It brought Richard Nixon down for going into my psychoanalyst office. But I can tell you that I'd been looking forward to meeting Julian Assange, and now I have this feeling that he's behind me, and it's very like being on the couch again, you know, sort of, talking. And I can even see in this day now a young Assange would, I'm sure, be sitting on the couch with tweeting to his...
Oh, God, no. Hopefully not.
Okay. Anyway, I can see you here. It's good to see you.
Of course, I'm naked from the waist down, Dan.
What do you say?
He says he knows you from the waist down.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, if there's anything you want to say to each other, I have some questions, but I thought I'd give you first a chance just to exchange.
Well, I mean, Dan is a hero of mine, of course, and why I was being born, Daniel was leaking the Pentagon Papers.
That's right, that's right. 1971, yes, I noticed that.
But Dan and I have been playing this sort of instant telephone tag for 4 years now.
You've been...
And I remember when we first launched, Dan sent a congratulatory message. And said that the quote that we had used was not quite correct. Can you hear me? You're looking very puzzled.
We are, because the sound is... Now we hear you fine. Keep going.
All right, so yes. Dan sent us a congratulatory message when we launched, correcting a quote that we had attributed to him. It was by Abby Hoffman, turns out.
I'm missing some of this. But
Yeah, he said that you sent them a congratulatory message they had attributed to you. Turns out it was Abby Hoffman. There was some confusion between the two of you. Well,
I'm honored.
I'm going to dive in and ask you guys some questions. And I should express some appreciation to Noam Cohen from the New York Times, who actually planted the seed that led to this meeting. Because he, after WikiLeaks posted the video of that US helicopter shooting some civilians and others in Iraq, including children. Dan, you were interviewed by the Times, and you told Noam Cohen that if you had the Pentagon Papers today, that you wouldn't have given them to the press to analyze and then publish. You said, I wouldn't have waited that long. I would have gotten a scanner and put them up on the internet. And so my question to you, and then Julian, jump in, but don't you think that the news media has an important role in analyzing raw information? If you had just put the Pentagon Papers online, would they have had the same impact? Didn't the New York Times and other newspapers add vital context to help us understand, literally, here's what, for example, McNamara said to the public, here's what he was saying in private, you can now see the contradiction?
I think the key thing with putting them out in the newspapers eventually was that it tempted Nixon to do what no president had ever done in 200 years, and that was to try to enjoin the process. If it had all been dumped out on the internet, say in one great batch, which a scanner would have allowed me to do, as I noticed, you've had 2,400 page things on it, which is impressive. But if I'd done that with a scanner, they would have said, well, it's out, there's nothing we can do about it. and would not have been tempted to enjoin it. Now, the injunctions, which were unprecedented, made for a duel, multi-part duel between the government and various newspapers. They enjoined, a lot of you are like Julian, were thinking of other things in 1971, like bottle or something. The mother's breast. The fact is that the Times was enjoined, whereupon I gave it to the Washington Post through Ben Begdikian. They were enjoined, stopped, in other words, from publishing. Again, the First Amendment had been instituted in large part to prevent this, and it always had prevented a prior restraint before. So then I gave it to the Boston Globe. They were enjoined. In the face of 4 injunctions, in the end, 19 newspapers ended up putting out parts of the Pentagon Papers. Right. So day after day, every day, actually, almost over 15 minutes on the evening news, day after day, was devoted to this ongoing struggle, which stamped it in the public minds in a very dramatic way. And it didn't have so much to do with the content, although the headlines all said, Johnson lied, Kennedy lied, you know, Eisenhower lied, and so forth. So that dramatic notion kept coming in. But in terms of the content, probably there was more attention on the fact the government is unable to stop this flow of information as the current government and the BP are unable to stop the flow in the Gulf. And I noticed that today, for instance, you're seeing this 45th day, I saw in the news today, of the oil spill. Well, that's going to go on and on and on, and it's going to have an impression on the public mind that a one-day story or a two-day story couldn't have. So I think it was the drama of that, and the internet probably wouldn't have allowed that because they wouldn't have thought of themselves as able to try to stop it, and they just would have had to accept it. On the other side, it is true that there was the material there for people to read in large amounts, and it wasn't that much interpretation. They pretty much dumped out what was in the Pentagon Papers. Okay. There wasn't a lot of context that was involved. In fact, I had hoped that once the flurry was done of the newspaper and the material was all out there, that magazines would pick up on this, monthlies or bi-weeklies or whatever, and books, and analyze the material and really interpret it for the people and show, in particular, how it conflicted with what was being said at the time and how much lying had gone on. That really wasn't done. I was disappointed in that.
Julian, do you want to answer the question? I mean, do you think that newspapers and other professional media, if you will, play an interpretive role that's still vital, or are you finding when you put information out through WikiLeaks that the impact is as strong as it needs to be in your view?
So, approach this from two. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. The challenge is actually, and I'm going to speak for the entire American audience here, it's both a little bit of a feedback, the Max Headroom effect, and your accent. So
fantastic.
We're going to do our best to understand.
I will sign. But let me try headphones. Hang on.
Oh, headphones.
Hello.
Okay, we
Any better? Same.
I should say to folks that I've met Julian, and when you meet him in person, it's as difficult to understand. So, but we're doing. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. So go ahead, Julian. I mean, the question. Okay, the question is, what kind of impact you can have with raw information? Go.
Okay, so I approach this from two different perspectives. The first is that you can create bait to draw dragons out of their cave legally.
Right.
So we did that as an example with Bank Julius Baer, although we had set up our structure to be an unsuable publisher, we still drew that bank into a court case in San Francisco. We deliberately set up structure there so that it would be attacked in the free speech hotbed of the United States.
Right.
So there's a lot of information in the world, and most people don't know whether it's important or not important. So they look for an economic signal that some information is more important than others. Dan's signal for the Pentagon Papers was two things. Can you hear?
You may say that again.
God damn.
You're wishing you got on that plane.
How would I call back? Get Dan to answer some interesting question. I'll call back.
Call back. Good. We'll reconnect. Yes, Andrew, come up and give us a hand. And I'm going to ask you a question, Dan.
Okay.
And thank you, audience, for bearing with this. The question I wanted to ask you about, and this is drawn from your book, Secrets, the memoir of Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers. You talk about how this whole system of government secrecy warps decision-making by the men and women in control of the national security apparatus, the Pentagon, and so on, because they know that they know more than other people, and because they also believe that they can manipulate the public with this special knowledge. They can withhold information, and because they can effectively do that, it warps their decision-making. They may make worse decisions, they may take bigger risks, because they're also getting away with deception. So my question is whether you think the existence of the internet and sites like WikiLeaks is changing that behavior. Do they now, I mean, those of us who come from the political space keep saying to politicians, you know, you want to get the benefit of all this energy online, you have to give up some control, right? You don't have perfect control of your message anymore. What you do have is a lot of people who may want to talk with you, but you have to give up some of that very tight message discipline in order to tap into the power of the community and the network. And some politicians are actually willing to take some of those risks, but the question is whether you think the same effect of things like WikiLeaks and the existence of the internet might change this very hermetic world of the national security decision-making process.
Well, it has a ways to go. As we're seeing, we're talking about technology here. And I might say, by the way, that when I heard that we were going to do this with Skype, I was quite excited. I thought, well, that really illustrates the point of this whole conference, you know, what technology can do and bring us together. And now we see, as usual, there are a few bugs to be worked out. We're not quite there yet. It was a little like your first comment I heard when you said, look up on the screen, we can see the oil leak, you know, as an example of what technology will do for us. And of course, the technology that is spewing oil into the Gulf at this point, you know, is 21st century technology, which is not exactly an advertisement for what technology will do for the world. We're able to see the disaster, you know, it's sort of like the apocalypse will be televised, it turns out. Or Armageddon, you know, the end of the world, we'll be able to watch it on our screens as it goes.
Yeah.
They, I think, are very far from feeling that WikiLeaks or anything else is about to make their operations transparent. It hasn't done so. I'm totally admiring of your effort on the video here. And by the way, the Newsweek, New Yorker article that I just read on Julian yesterday goes into how much effort was made and went into putting that out, and that was really worthwhile, and I totally applaud that. But that's on the video of the murder, which was aptly called. It was murder. In fact, there is no perception, I think, more important on the whole operation than to observe the fact, to recognize the fact that while not all killing in war is murder, most of it is. Actually, a whole lot of it is killing. There is killing in war that is murder. And what you're watching in that video, if not every bit of the killing, I think you acknowledged that in the first part of it, there was a justifiable mistake, although, as you put it, a very careless mistake of deciding that a long-distance camera was actually an RPG. Didn't represent a lot of caretaking on the part of the people. Nevertheless, the later killings, killing a wounded man, crawling away, the shooting of the children, and so forth, is murder. And indeed, it was the recognition that what was going on in Vietnam by 1971 and later, in my mind, was thoroughly unjustified homicide, deliberate homicide without justification, which to me meant murder. And to me, that put an obligation to do something to stop it that went beyond what I'd felt when I just thought it was a mistake, it was wasteful, it was not hopeful. All of those gave me a sense that it should be stopped. But when I saw it as murder, it affected what I felt I had to do about it. Now, going right to the question you asked, looking at the index of things that WikiLeaks has on its panel, which I just saw the other day, I went over, virtually all of which deserve to be out. I was really struck, though, by what a tiny, minuscule fraction of the information inside the government that the public needs, that the public should have, that is wrongfully withheld, has actually gotten out in any form whatever, including WikiLeaks. In other words, there's a potential there for people to tell the truth when they recognize that we're being lied into a wrongful and hopeless war, that murder is going on. There's a potential for them to get it out and to do it with less risk than they would have without WikiLeaks, but is far, far from being realized. And I hope it will be realized. But as of now, I'm sure the officials, starting with Barack Obama on down, still feel that they can get away with lying to the public in State of the Union messages and otherwise in blatant ways. And I believe that Barack Obama was lying when he implied to the public in his State of the Union message, just like Lyndon Johnson in '65, that there was a limit, a low limit to what he's going to put into Afghanistan. The 30,000 or 40,000 he's sending, he implied, will be the last escalation, and after, in 18 months or 24 months, he will be drawing that down. I don't believe that's true at all, and I don't believe that he believes it's true. I think he's lying exactly the way that Lyndon Johnson lied. And when he says that, and when he says that we will be pulling all troops out of Iraq in some 18 months or less, all combat troops this year and all troops by the end of 2011, I believe that's totally false, that he knows it's false. I believe not just that there's a chance there will be 30 to 40,000 troops there in 2011 and 2012. I believe that it's almost certain. Nothing is entirely certain, but I think he knows that it's very unlikely that there will be less than 30,000 troops in Iraq in his second term. And that's a total lie to the state. Now, he isn't the first to do that. He's doing it because he thinks that the thousands of people in the Pentagon that I assume know that that's false, as I knew comparably in '64, '65, will keep their mouths shut, as I did in '64, '65. They will not risk their clearances or their career or their access or their income or thus their marriage, their children's education, all serious matters. But they won't take any risk of those in order to tell the public where we're really going, and he counts on that. If WikiLeaks can someday make it less possible for government officials, Democrat or Republican, to lie with confidence like that to the public, then they won't be able to carry out disastrous, costly, reckless ventures like Afghanistan or a possible attack on Iran. But we are very far from that yet, and the technology has not given us that. It takes more than technology. It will take some moral courage on the part of people to take risks with their careers.
Well said. Julian, can you hear us? Can we hear you? Okay, that's just what I feared. Do we have him on mute? Julian, can you hear us? Yes, we have the 2 thumbs up. You can hear us, good, but we cannot hear you. Okay, we're going to try this one more time.
Can you hear me?
Here we go. Great.
Yes.
All right, Julian, I want to give you a chance to comment on what Dan was just saying and the degree to which WikiLeaks is or isn't changing the environment within institutions that depend on controlling information.
Well, slowly, but it takes a long time. Every organization, as Dan would have known from being in RAND, rests upon a mountain of secrets, an enormous quantity. And almost everything that goes on is not leaked, including through WikiLeaks. We are just starting to take it on and setting some good examples. One of the important examples that we are giving is not just putting out information, it's not just revealing those stories, but rather it is making the whistleblower the hero of everything that we release, making that person visible. You know, a good third of times on any day is actually comes from unofficial sources. Mm-hmm. People within government or leaks. Comes from these people. But you, at best, see documents seen by the New York Times. Because leaking is inherently an authoritarian act. It's inherently an anarchist act. Because it is affecting the public of a hierarchical structure. And that in that defection, a whistleblower shows themselves to be someone who acts against a hierarchy. Mainstream media organisation can't be seen to be associated as much as they are with those sorts of acts. And the result is that people don't see Daniel Ellsbergs of the world who are working there successfully every day revealing information. And you know, Dan has this wonderful statement that I am very fond of and we use, which is that courage is contagious. But because courage is contagious, others are strengthened when they see a good example. Mm-hmm. So in Ramparts magazine, 1973, an NSA blower came forth and revealed key information to the National Security Agency, saying that Ellsberg inspired him to step forward.
Right.
So it was Dan's example.
Do you think, Julian, that the current crackdown that we're seeing on whistleblowers in the United States is in some way related to the existence of WikiLeaks as this new repository for whistleblowing? I mean, Dan is one of the only whistleblowers who has ever been prosecuted, a government official prosecuted for leaking information. I think there have only been 4 or 5 over history, and the 3 current cases are all being done by the Obama administration, including, well, it's not a prosecution yet, but it looks like they're going after James Risen, the New York Times reporter, yep, who reported on the secret wiretapping that was going on under the Bush administration. And there's some speculation that this is actually happening because people are nervous about sites like WikiLeaks. What do you think?
I'm not sure it's us. All our sources have not been exposed. As far as we can tell, certainly none have been publicly exposed. Rather, I think it's that the Democratic Party is now in government. The Democratic Party is taking on the bureaucracy. It is merging with the bureaucracy. It is merging with the military establishment. It is merging with the CIA, and it has become captured, like most organizations do, by the bureaucracies that they are meant to control. And formal restraint on government is the political opposition. And in the United States at the moment, the restraining force on government is the Republican Party. But it is so wedded with that establishment, it is not a restraining force at all. Maybe a restraining force on some fiscal arrangements, but it is not a restraining force on military and intelligence complex existing in the United States. So we see all major power groups pushing in the same direction. The bureaucracy is pushing in a direction to control people within the bureaucracy like it always has done. Democratic Party institutions are pushing in the same direction because they want to control the bureaucracy, and their interests are with the bureaucracy. And the Republican Party is too bound up with intelligence and military concerns, economically and in its power base, to restrain what is happening in the administration. So we see effort to suppress these whistleblowers, which is really quite extraordinary. When we look at the number compared to Bush regime, we look at the immediate post-9/11 environment when there might have been a little bit more concern, genuine concern, where there was not prosecution of these whistleblowers. And now there is, in the Obama regime, where there is a lot less genuine concern. So I think it's very worrying thing that is occurring, but nonetheless, remember that almost no one gets caught. Even now, the United States has 300 million people now. And how many prosecutions are we talking about? 5 out of 300 million people. It's nothing. Almost no one gets caught. Almost everyone is successful in leaking material. But the people who are caught become extremely visible. And people who care for them, and it's one of the reasons Daniel was on the stage, because we care for him, and we are inspired by him. We promote their visibility. Similarly, people who want to stop leaks also promote the visibility of whistleblowers who have been caught. So there is a perceptual illusion that it's actually very dangerous to do. But the reality is, for most people, there are some, leaking documents from the CIA is a little bit more difficult, but most organizations, it's very safe to do, even through conventional journalism.
Okay.
Much safer than walking across the street.
I'm
going to let Dan get the last word.
One of the prosecutions that's going on right now is that of Thomas Drake, who exposed some billion-dollar wasteful programs in the National Security Agency. Now, this was a Bush, this happened under Bush. His clearance was removed in November 2007. And the Bush administration, interestingly, thus had 2 years, or a year and a half, to decide to prosecute him, and they didn't do it. So now we have the Obama administration, which came in determined, according to Obama, not to look back at 8 years of criminality, of aggressive war, this and that, shredding of the Constitution, but rather just to look ahead, except in the case of people who were whistleblowers under Bush. And so they have several indictments now. One is pled guilty, Shami something, and Thomas Drake, a subpoena to Risen. All of these for events that took place under Bush. Those are the things that are being pursued. But in the case of Drake, it's very interesting. I don't know if you noticed this, Julian. He had tried to use a supposedly secure transmission system, a Canadian encryption basis, some court had hush in the title, and had been assured, that even our own employees can't read this and so forth, and hadn't read the fine print. There was no fine print saying, except for the National Security Agency and the FBI and whatnot, to whom they were giving access. So they were reading all this. Now, the very fight you're having now over the video and the other things probably will impress people, as it impressed me, that you really do have a technology that makes it hard for them to break into and that you're not giving them access to. And over time, that could perhaps, I hope, give people the confidence to use precisely your approach, and perhaps your approach can be given, as you've suggested, to other newspapers, to get more information out. But and it's the very video then that brought that to people's attention. I gave my first contribution to WikiLeaks seeing that. And I might mention that, I don't know whether you remember or not, but somebody in your organization, perhaps you, approached me at the very onset of WikiLeaks saying we have this idea for something that will allow people to send in leaks. And my attitude at the time was this is either a scam by CIA just to encourage people to to draw in people to do it, or it's a very naive effort somehow. I'm sure they can, NSA can get on top of this. And it's still amazing to me, as it seems to be the case, that NSA isn't able to crack this operation of yours. They're supposed to, that's what their job is. They're supposed to be able to do that. But if they can't do it, if you're really ahead of them, all the better. We came back, though, to your first point to me about scanning this stuff. When I tried to put this out through the Senate, and they backed off, Senator Fulbright and Senator Mathias and others, Gaylord Nelson, I then gave it to the Times, but the Times didn't tell me they were moving on for a matter of months, for reasons not entirely clear to me. I think they were afraid if they told me they were going ahead, I would rush to get it out simultaneously in Congress. But anyway, they didn't tell me. There was a 22-month period then from the start of my copying to it finally coming out. And as I say, had the internet existed then, which it didn't, I would hope, certainly in my present state of mind, that I would have bought a scanner, as I have now, and put it, say, on I have an internet site now, ellsberg.net. I would have put it right on that, sent it out to all the blogs, and got it out. And as you said, it's not certain that that would have had as good an effect or as big an effect because they couldn't stop it. We wouldn't get the duel started. Right. There wouldn't be the interpretation. But at least it would have been out. I'm very struck that when James Risen found that from a guy named Thomas Tam, who again was investigated into the Obama administration, and as far as we know is still being investigated for having put out that the NSA was blatantly illegally conducting warrantless wiretaps. So he gave them that in 2004, the Times. On the request of the White House, the Times did what you didn't do with your video. They went to the government and said, we have this, what do you think about it? And the administration, it persuaded them not to put it out for a whole year. A year went by when dozens of sources by that time could have put this information on the internet, or someday, let's say tomorrow on the internet, and they didn't do it. They should have done that. Right. They should not have waited all that time.
So we're going to need to close it up, but and Julian, thank you for, it's like 2 in the morning there, I know. The point which we're going to come back to at the end of the day when we discuss the role of the internet in democratization worldwide is this question of how free is information, how well protected are whistleblowers or democracy activists. This is still an open question. I think WikiLeaks is clearly trying to push the envelope further, and it's a very interesting project and one that we in the PDF community are going to continue to pay close attention to. And I thank you, Dan, for reminding us both of the historical importance and how today this question is still very much with us as to whether we are being given the truth and what we need to do to make sure that we are. So thank you both. I'm going to pull Andrew up. You have to take us out.